trade here, and now we're the development side. So we had the 15-minute RSI trade. We had the second part to it, which is the development of the trade, and then we have the third part, which is finishing the trade strategy part, which is the development of the trade, which leads us to this trade here, which is more about the entry. So to kind of cover the other videos real quick, we had it where the original trade is all based off a 15, or the RSI, not a stochastic RSI, but just a regular RSI. And when the 15-minute gets above the 50 line, it creates a momentum trade. Well, that's a lot of trades in there. We wanted a little more, we wanted trades that had more bite to it, so we wanted the juicier part of the trade. So that we implemented where we want the 4-hour RSI, which is, you see this orange arrow here, to be the one that breaks above the 50 line on the RSI side, regular RSI. And what that would do is that triggers a area for us to decide that once that happens, then that we can start looking at the 15-minute RSI entries that we basically originally how the trade is based. The second thing that we implemented is these purple boxes here. Now what these purple boxes represent is the stochastic RSI, and what they simply are is that when the stochastic RSI breaks above the 20 line, it creates this purple box. So as you can see here, those are the two things that we have. We want the 4-hour RSI, the regular RSI, to be above the 50 line on the RSI. And then on the stochastic RSI, the reason you would make this trade or even look to make this trade is that the stochastic 4-hour RSI has broken the 20 line. So those two things, 4-hour stochastic RSI breaking the 20 and the 4-hour RSI breaking the 50 line, would start this trade, right? And that's part of the trade development. Once those things happen, you have a purple box and an orange arrow, right? Once that happens, then we slide down to the 15-minute, which is where we're going to kind of have the original base of this trade, which simply came down to this. Once the RSI breaks the 50 line, the 15-minute trade would be the trade that would consider the entry point. So we here, now that we have a purple box, which started, we can see the purple box started back here, and then we got the orange arrow here, which means that once that happened, that means at that point we can start looking for entries, right? Which brings us to this next white arrow, which is when the 15-minute RSI starts to break up and show momentum here. You can see at that time when the orange line came in, there was a couple entry points here. Now normally how we like this trade is that once we see the RSI breaking based on the orange arrow, we would start looking for an entry, right? So we're going to take that over here, and what we're going to do is take a look at how that played out on this particular trade here, right? So that's the 15-minute right there breaking, and this would be considered where we would be looking for an entry, right? So this part right here is, okay, this trade is live. Now, walking through an entry point or how to enter, you want to have a strategy that rinse and repeats, right? And so normally what we're going to have here is, if we're playing into this section here, a couple things that we like to have is, your value, right? So you can see here that this momentum trade already has value on the 15-minute. At that current time, when we actually got the arrow to enter, you can see the orange line there. We were in a blue moon on the 15-minute, right? So we have a blue moon there. So if we waited for this moon to switch back over and give us a green moon, that is where we can see that we move our entry down to this section here, right? Just because we're playing into that particular trade. Now, some people have it where they like to do, once a trade happens, they like what's called a moon reset, right? Meaning that they want a moon to go green, blue, green, right? So when this orange arrow happens, we happen to be inside of a blue moon. So then what would happen is, most of the time, guys will take an entry on the next green moon, but there is a step to an entry process, which is a moon reset. Which would that mean is that the blue moon's in effect, so the very first time we get a green moon, that's considered one. The blue moon is the second move, and the third moon green moon would be considered the third move. So you like how we have that 1, 2, 3 type scenario, and that takes us to where we would consider an entry, right? So if we did that same philosophy here, that means that we would be entering off this green moon, which would put us somewhere on this point here, right? And that right there would be considered the entry point that we would be looking into. And I'm just going to make this a fatter arrow, and I'm just going to make it orange, just so that we know that that is the moon reset, right? So that means that on our entry point, we would be in this area here. So somewhere off of this candle would be that entry point. The other entry points would be the first orange arrow, meaning that the RSI pointed up, you decided to get in, not a bad entry. Or the next entry would be where you get the next green moon, which would have put you here. And I'm going to turn this one yellow because that's the pre-entry, right? So these are the 3 entries that you could take on this particular trade. The first entry is the orange, saying, okay, the 4-hour RSI just broke above broke up from the 50 line, making this a go trade. And then you just take your entry point. So that would be, your entry would be somewhere, off that candles that are there. The second would be you go to the 15-minute and you let the moon, if it's a blue moon, you wait for green. If it's a green moon, you let a moon reset and you go, etc. Green, blue, green, and etc. So those are the trades that you can get into. So since it wasn't a blue moon, that simply means the next green moon would have been. So this area here is blue. This turned green. That puts you in an entry here. If you do the moon reset, right, which is where it turns green, you have to wait for it to go blue, and then the next green moon is your entry, which puts you here as an entry. So these are all the entry points right there. So a lot of times what we want to do here is, kind of take a look at that, and what we're going to do is, see over the next couple trades here, we're going to review it to see what we get as far as like which one of those steps or strategies actually panned out to be, a little bit better than the other. So that's where we're at there. So in this particular case, the moon reset gave us a pretty good entry, put us somewhere in on this candle, which, I mean, hypothetically, if we looked at all these trades, more than likely we're probably getting into the, except for this trade, we're probably getting in here. This trade, we're getting somewhere off this candle here. And then this trade, we're getting somewhere off this candle here. So 136.42, 137.46, 137. So that's pretty much, we're in that area there. Not too bad. We'll measure this out real quick just to kind of see the positioning on that. It just puts us in a position where the higher one was 0.75, the middle one was 0.5%, and the other one was 0.9. So what we're looking at here is at a 0.5, so it's a 0.5% or a 0.75% difference between those particular entries, right? And then obviously playing this particular trade, getting in this here, we have the entry point here, which is going to be the green line, where we took the higher average. What we do here is, instead of taking the best entry or taking the best possible move, we kind of take the worst entry that would have happened, so that we can measure out real numbers. Because most of the time guys are not going to get the greatest entry. They're going to get probably the toughest entry, and that's the results that we have to live and die by, right? So this arrow here shows the downside. That's the lowest part that we would have hit. And then the green arrow here shows that, the highest ride that we would have went to. And then you also have the white arrow, which is the ride to the first top. And then if somebody's playing the 1, 2, 3 or that scenario, then this kind of shows where they would have had a pullback and then a second move to the upside, right? So that's kind of like that scenario there, the 1, 2, 3, right? So that's how that trade plays out, right? And we take a quick peek here on this, and just so the reason why we're, with all the way this is set up and waiting for the purple, the 4-hour RSI breaking the 20, waiting for the 4-hour regular RSI to break the 50, it puts us in a situation where this trade here went for its peak, it averaged 4.5%. So we'll go down to here and say 3.5, 4. We'll take the middle ground here. So this particular trade box gave us a 4% trade. Not a bad trade, pretty decent. Yeah, we'll lock it in there. But that's the gist of it, and that's how that trade pretty much ended right there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move over to the next trade and walk through that same scenario, right? So here we go here. Now this particular trade ends up doing okay. It doesn't have the 4-hour RSI breaking above the 20. This just simply has the 4-hour stochastic RSI breaking above the 20. This has the orange arrow, which represents the 4-hour RSI breaking the 50 line, right? So if we look at this particular situation and we go by the same scenario, right, which is if we were looking here, what we would have is basically at the time of the arrow, right, we would be in a scenario where we'd have a blue moon. So then on the next moon, right, which would be this one, would be considered an entry. And then if we did the moon reset, it would be 1, 2, and then we'd enter off this one here. So that would be the moon reset. So let's take a look at those entries real quick. And that puts us here. So if we go off the green moon, we'd be entering somewhere off this particular arrow here. And I'm going to make that 2. And then if we waited for the true moon reset, then we would be entering somewhere off this arrow here. And I'll make that orange, but fatter. And those are the options that come with this particular trade here. Now you can see here that particular trade style didn't work on the moon reset. We ended up getting into a position where, I mean, we probably clear, yeah, I'm going to consider that a loss. But here, the first 2 entries would have been the way to go, which is as soon as you get a 4-hour orange arrow breaking the 50, you enter. It seems to be the best entry without having any other particular steps to it. Just basically the entry would be when the 4-hour RSI breaks the 50 line, you can enter a trade, right? When you wait for the white line, which is the next green moon, it kind of puts you in the same scenario. So that's kind of where, I don't know if the moon reset here would be, you know, something I would use in this particular trade. I would probably just be using the RSI breaking. So far, it's been pretty accurate here. Now let's go ahead and measure this out. Without the 4-hour stochastic RSI breaking to the upside of the 20, you know, this trade ends up giving us a 2% move to the upside before it kind of like fizzles out, right? So we'll mark this here. Now the difference is that's half of what we were getting from the other trade with the RSI being in our momentum. So the thing about that is we always want to take trades that have a 50% move, half of that. So this is an average of 1%. So if we do get in this trade, probably going to be a trade if we're doing a 70x leverage. You know, our target for these particular trades are going to be 30 to 40%. So we would be right in the ballpark of that area. This trade could probably yield us 50 to 60%. And if it doesn't have the greatest momentum, probably 30 to 40 it's going to hit for sure. But that's kind of where, you know, we're right on the edge there. But once again, waiting for that RSI to, you know, the 4-hour RSI to break above the 50, a very successful trade, right? And this is where you have to kind of like, when you don't have that 4-hour stochastic RSI momentum with you, you need to be very aware that your trade isn't going to do the 4 to 6% that you think it'll do, simply because when you got in this particular trade, you didn't have that momentum piece with you, right? So let's go over here. Now let's move to the next particular trade, right, which we already have kind of marked out here. And the same scenario. So this scenario here has the orange line. So the orange line represents, once again, simply the 4-hour RSI on a regular RSI breaking a 50 line, right? So that puts us in a scenario where we would be looking to get in this trade off this arrow here, which would put us somewhere around there. And then This is our pull down, right? This arrow here is the pull down, and then the other green arrow is the upward. Now, this scenario here, if you incorporate the next green moon, that means that you would be somewhere off of this arrow here, which would then put your buy somewhere in this zone here at 137. So slightly better, not that much, greater. And then, like I said, the moon reset takes us out of this trade because we wouldn't actually get in this trade until this section over here. And so far, I'm not seeing a reason to need that. If anything, just waiting for the next green moon alert to pop off. Remember, the moon doesn't always show up right away. If you're playing the moon alerts, you'll get an alert on your side that's like, or the moon will flicker, right? You'll see it, or the alert will go off, say the moon's coming, but it hasn't fully showed up until the next 15-minute candle actually happens. But it looks like, let's say you're just playing the 4-hour once again, playing into that 15-minute moon, same scenario. So let's measure this out here. So far this trade, without too much, without having to add too much, extra to it, has a pullback here of about 0.68 on it. And then the push up here, it looks like it averages about 8%, right? So we'll put this here, 8%. So far, this trade is producing really good momentum trades here. Now, the concern here would be, when you see this particular moment here, the reason why we do moon resets or we wait for the green moon to come in is simply because of this beginning section. So the only thing I would do here is that if you are in a blue moon, by waiting for the next 15-minute green moon, which is, you got to have some type of safety net there, and you always got to have something. What I mean by that is you have to have something that allows you to wait for the pullback to happen and get the wicks out of the way. So waiting for the next green moon is one thing I would implement here and say, okay, once you get that 4-hour RSI arrow, if it's a blue moon on the 15-minute, you have to wait for the next 15-minute green moon, right? Even if you got in higher up here. The reason is because this dip here that you're taking because you jumped early without having some type of confirmation that the momentum is fully in your area is a pullback that actually runs about 0.5%, right? Now, if you're running a leverage, right, let's say we're averaging this at 70%, right? This means that this pullback ends up getting to 35% of the stop loss, right? So if your stop loss is like we're running 70, 70. I think on this we're going to run a little bit higher because on the wins we're getting, with the good momentum, we're getting an average of 2 to 4. So 70% on this would be 2% move would be 140%. So our target here instead of would probably be 60. So we would run 70x, 60% target on the trade, and a 35% stop loss. Right? So that would be the numbers here. So 70, 60, and then maybe even just 30. Just keep it at 30, right? Something simple, but I would probably run 35. This particular moment here with this 0.5%, we would have got stopped out of that. We could have came back and then got in here a little bit later, but we don't want to lose that trade. So far right now the entry would be 4-hour RSI breaking the 50 and then the 15-minute green moon, right? Trading with a green moon, not in a blue. If it's blue, you wait for the green. And that's pretty much all I can see here for, having the steps that we need to execute this trade. So far, it's been very simple, easy to see and understand. Same scenario here. We come across, we get the orange arrow. If we do the same thing on here, it happens to be at that time during a blue arrow. This next arrow here represents the green moon coming in after the blue. That puts us here at this 13.9, and once again you can see we ended up running this up, and it ends up being a pretty good trade here. So yeah, and then there's a pullback here that happens, and that's that second orange arrow that pops in. And if you missed that first one, then you would have bought that pullback, and then you'd still be in this section pretty good here. So like I said, I think the only thing that we run here on the entry is simply the 4-hour RSI breaking the 50. Once that happens, you slide down to the 15-minute, and all you're looking for is a 15-minute green moon. And that's pretty much it, because momentum wise, this trade is already developed to where when the momentum hits, if you look at the volume on the moon chart here, every time the orange hits, it's pretty much at a time where the volume is already like heading up to the plus side for the 15, and I'm not seeing right now any issue with the momentum side of this, right? So the only thing I see is that when you see when you go to the 15-minute to get your entry, if it's a 15-minute blue moon, you simply enter on the next 15-minute green moon. And what Ed has found out is when he dug in is he went and started using the 10-minute, which is, you can do that as well. Using the 10-minute just gives you a little more heads up into the 15-minute green moon and kind of get you in that spot there. So like I said, if it's during a 15-minute blue moon, just slide down to the 10-minute or the 15, just look for the next green moon, and that'll be our entry. Now, once that's pretty much the entire play, right? That's the entire trade. So this trade is complete here. So then the next thing here is that we're really doing here on this particular trade here is, now we're looking for results, right? Which is everyone calling the same thing, right? So if you see the 4-hour RSI getting ready to break whatever coin, doesn't have to be XRP, we can use this on Doge, Solana, other coins as well, is when you start to see this action where you see the 4-hour RSI breaking on whatever coin you're looking at, right? Or getting ready to, you could say possible, right? You would post something like this. So this is where posting is very important so that we're all on the same trade, right? So in the live chat, for letting everyone know, you can go, so 4-hour RSI trade on Doge, right? Now, what that means is it doesn't mean you're entering, it doesn't mean you're ready to get in. It just means that everyone needs to go look at Doge and see where the regular RSI is, right? And if you guys don't know which the RSI is on TradingView, it's just basically you go to indicators and you just type in RSI, and let me see, this one is
BC. I just posted a couple potential trades that I'm looking at.
I've seen you.
If you want something to, well, I actually abandoned ship on one of them because of the 4 hours, so I'm testing it out.
Yeah.
And then I found another one that looks better.
Well, yeah. So I I like this momentum type thing. I mean, we could apply this, but this will be, this is the 15-minute trade, and then just using the regular RSI, right? So you just pull up an RSI. So if you guys don't have that, you can use it, and then the stochastic RSI is obviously what we use already. And those are the two things that we're really using there with the moon indicator side. But yeah, so then once you post that, everyone who's inside of the boot camps can see that and then go take a peek, right? The second thing is that if it breaks, right? So you can type in here, you can type 4-hour RSI 50 line, right? Doge. And what that means is the RSI broke the 50 line on Doge, right? So then if you're looking at that, everyone can go in and look, which means what? That means that we're going to enter a trade at that time on the 15-minute moon, right? If it's blue, then we're going to wait for the 15-minute green moon. Or if you want to jump, you can test it. You can do 10, whatever you decide to do. 10-minute green moon, right? The only difference is that when all that happens and you actually enter a trade, you would basically put it like this. You would put 10-minute green moon Doge entry, right? And just so everyone knows, we're doing 15-minute RSI trade, and boom. Now everyone knows that you've just entered that trade and you're playing that particular trade, right? Now what you want to do there is just track what happens to that trade. So whatever happens to that particular trade, you can piece that together and kind of like, put that into the data, right? Because what we need is the information from all those trades that we do to go back and just validate what we're seeing, right? So if you guys are in the boot camp, right, if you go to your 102, you slide down, you'll see in the 102 you'll have people that are in. So Ed's in there, right? And you can see where Ed's posting trades. And this is where I got to go back and look at Ed's trades, right? I got to go back. Dre's in here too. Dre's going to have it in there. He FOMO'd in. Joey's in here. Young's in here. And this is where when you post trades, you can see like the results that we're kind of getting in there. So here's where 14-minute high-level trade. This is the actual trade that we're developing right now. And what we're going to do here is every time we're making this trade, that when you guys post inside of the main chat, I'm going to go back, evaluate the trade, and then I'm going to put the information here, right? So what will happen is we'll have the 45-minute high leverage trade, but we'll have the entries and the results posted inside of here. So then we can start fine-tuning the entries if we need to, fine-tuning the little pieces to the puzzle. But we'll have the data here. So when you guys all post in the free chat area, I can go back, look at that scenario, and then once I take my time and I go through the trade that you just did, I can break down, miss the moon, use this moon, maybe we do the 5-minute, right? Because what we got to do here is we have to execute this trade better, right? So far, it's a pretty good trade. I don't see anything wrong with the trade overall. It's pretty juicy. So now we just got to, sharpen up the entry size to it, and that's it. So when you guys post here, post your information there. 4-hour RSI trade on Doge, 4-hour 50-line Doge. And then when you enter, put in there 10-minute green moon Doge entry. If you use the 15-minute, then you would just say this, 15-minute green moon Doge entry, right? And you could put and that's pretty much it. And we'll know what you're talking about there because we know that we're all trading that particular trade on that level, right? And if you want to add more to it, you can be like, you can post what the trade is. 15-minute RSI trade, 15-minute green moon entry, right? And then you can put your entry. You can say you entered Doge at 12 cents, 12 cents 7, and boom. So when I go back and look at this, I can see the 15-minute RSI trade. I know what you're trading, right? You're not doing a student trade. You're not doing anything like that. So post what trade you're doing. If you're doing the other student trade or other trades that we develop going down the road, post it. This makes it easier now that I'm seeing it. 15-minute RSI trade, right? I know what that is, right? So now the 15-minute green moon entry, right? 15-minute moon green entry, right? So I know what that is because that's the entry for that particular trade. It's either 15 or 10, right? So if you did the 10, you go 15-minute RSI trade, and then you'd be the 10-minute green moon entry, Doge, boom. And then I can go back and look at that trade right there, and I can evaluate it, and we're going to track it together. At the end of it, you're going to post your result. When it's done, put what it is, right? So, and remember, we're trading 70x leverage. We're trading a 60% target, and we're trading a 35% stop loss, right? So that is the trade that we'll be doing. And what you'll see is when the 102, we have our trades here, right? So here's your trades, right? Here's the 4-hour RSI trade. That's the RSI trade setup. So this is a trade that we do based on student trades, right? This will be the 15 minutes. So what's going to happen here is I'm going to add in here the particular trade, right? What leverage we do, how we do it. And this will be the, see how it says 45-minute high leverage tracker, right? And then what will happen is here, we'll pop in, and then what I'm thinking is like I'll probably do a little breakdown of how to, after this I'll see where it puts, but what we'll do is the breakdown of how we're doing it, high leverage, right? And then a lot of times what I'll do is when we're tracking it, I'll put into the top here, attention. Okay, it is a 70x 60% target, 35% stop loss trade for data, meaning that's how we all trade. Now when I post this, I'll take this and I'll just pin this up top. So if you ever need to know what the trade is or what we're trying to do to it, just slide to the top, and then that should be pinned up there at wherever the section is right there. But that's the trade, 70, 60, 35. And I'll repost that in there more often. So when we do this trade, we're doing a 70x leverage, we're doing a 60% target, we're doing 35% stop loss for data, right? And as we get the data and we start to improve on this, then we can get to the situation where we can start adjusting this, right? And you know, for you guys, what you can do for your targets is that you can take your 60% target if you're not watching it. If you're watching it and you see it like, you know, hit 50%, you can move your, you know, put your stop loss at 35% take profit, right? And then, you know, move your target up if you want. If you think it's moving, move it up to 80, maybe 100%, right? And leave it at that point. So, but 100's your max, right? Now probably, so it'll look like this. So notes, the profit trail is 35% take or target and 100% max. What that means is if you get above 35, 40, 50% and you want to go for 100, put your stop loss, your profit trail at 35% for your target locked in, and then move the target to from 60 to 100%. So that if it does jump up and hits it, you get 100. If it falls back down, you get 35. Does that make sense? For you guys in Discord, that makes sense for you guys?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So no matter what,
That way you're locking in your profits. You're not going to lose.
yes. But that's what we want to see every time. So then after that, we'll collect the data. Once we have the data, then we can move on to the next part, which is fine-tuning the trade, fine-tuning the entry. But from what I'm seeing, this is a pretty cut and dry trade that we can get into, and we can get into it pretty often. So I'm going to close out this video here with the entry points. So that's the breakdown for the entry for the 15-minute high leverage trade.